This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast. This is episode 169. I'm your host, Adam the Jock Strozinski. On today's show, we've got some insights as to what's going on with AEW and possibly a new working partner. Is something really worked out? We're not quite sure. Some new part-time wrestlers coming back to WWE, or maybe some old wrestlers that are going to be working part-time coming back to WWE, as well as what's going on with John Cena and who just recently got fired from WWE. We've got all that in the mix, as well as one of the most, it's being described this way, edited AEW match in history. We've got all that for you in the news and notes. Of course, we're going to take a look at the biggest topics and trends in wrestling. But, you know, we had the Royal Rumble this past weekend. You know, we got to break it down. We got to discuss it. We got to figure out who got the points out of all the madness. And when I say who got the points out of all the madness, you know I'm referring to the one, the only. He is the man that I've got to beat every single time we do a prediction segment. He's the one. He's the only. He is the Doc, John Macaroon. What's up, cuz?
Cuz, do you know the marker of when you know you're old? It's when you sit down for a pay-per-view, you're super excited, and you get through it, you're excited, you see the great matches, you see Kevin Owens take on Roman Reigns, and then the big match happens, the men's 30-man over-the-top battle royal. You're into it, all of a sudden, you're out. You're falling asleep. You wake up, and you miss the biggest return of the night. So I got through about 17, 18 entrants, and I think 19 was Baron Corbin, if I'm not mistaken. And then I'm out. The next thing I know, there's 4 guys left, and I'm like, what just happened? And you wake up, and you're like, oh. And then wait a minute, there's Christian in the ring. And I'm like, oh, God, please don't let that be the big return. And it was. Christian, number 30, was not Brock Lesnar. Christian was the big return, and everyone's like, oh, it's Christian. And I get the sentiment. I understand. But I didn't mark out as much as everyone online did.
Let me tell you how hyped you were for this. You somehow put a group message together with myself and our buddy Kenny, who's a massive wrestling fan. The whole time it was going on, I was basically keeping up with it. I had it on the TV. But I was at the girlfriend's house, and she has me doing all these different projects around her house. Like, all of a sudden, I become a handyman. My name's like Tim the Toolman Taylor, apparently. And I'm installing all these different light fixtures for her. And I run into one light fixture. And if you've ever done anything on an old house, you know that you'll go into a project, and it should maybe take you 10 minutes, maybe a half hour at the most. 4.5 hours later, you're still working on it because you got to fix everything, and you basically got to jerry-rig it any way possible. That was where I was at when the Royal Rumble started. I was lucky enough to be able to follow along on my watch as you were texting with Kenny, and Kenny was texting back with you. Had it on the TV in the background, so I was able to hear it, and I was able to stop what I was doing every now and again and kind of just check out different things. But I was lucky enough to finally get done and witness the 30-man over-the-top battle royal in its entirety, which was awesome. But you're right. This kind of felt like it was a bit of a letdown as far as the Royal Rumble goes. I don't think it was a bad show. I'm not saying it was a bad show. But normally with the Royal Rumble, like, I was excited. I thought there was a good possibility we were going to get John Cena. And that was the one guy I wanted to see. And I was like, all right, cool. Like, all I want to do is just be able to watch that so I can see him come out so I can pop really hard and it'll make my night. When Christian is your biggest return, right? Or Christian's the big name who debuts at the Royal Rumble, we've got a little bit of an issue here because Christian's been back and forth on Monday Night Raw. He was part of the whole Edge storyline with Randy Orton. Christian's been around. I don't really look at him as basically coming back to the fold. You know what I'm saying? So it kind of felt like it was a bit of a letdown as far as the Royal Rumble goes.
Yeah, bro hugs are great, but it's like, did you guys not watch the Edge and Christian show? They hang out together. They're friends. Yeah. It's nice, and maybe we'll get one more tag team effort with Edge and Christian, which would be fine. But the run on 48-year-old wrestlers making their way back is not what I'm looking for. We're looking for next. We're looking for big surprises. Guys that are on your network, that show up, that do shows, that review your product is not new. Dude, I watched Edge.
Well, this is the thing, though. This is where I think the Royal Rumble got it right. If you look at the ladies' Royal Rumble, I think everything that we're asking for is what we got, and we'll get into it all. Let's kick this whole thing off because we've got a ton to get through. We got a massive show planned. Let's start with the first match: Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler taking on Asuka and Charlotte. Now, Ric Flair came down and Lacey Evans came down. How I predicted it would happen. They got involved. Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler become your new tag team champs of the women's division. Basically, all of WWE there. Drew McIntyre ends up claymoring the crap out of Goldberg to retain his title. I thought obviously the right move. You were messaging. You thought it was funny. Goldberg basically blew up on his entrance.
He looked blown up on his entrance, and okay, they let him go. Oh, it was funny timed. It was an 11-minute entrance for a 7-minute match, and it was 3 minutes too long. Come on, you didn't need this. To open the show, it was fine. And Goldberg put him over. I don't need to see, because now it's getting played out the way it should happen and the way it needs to be from now until Everdom is I don't need to see, in terms of a feud, two guys that talk crap to each other, and then, Goldberg puts the guy over, and then he stands there in the ring and looks all meek and then puts the guy's hand up. That's been done by WWE back to when Hogan and The Rock back at WrestleMania 18. Put that to bed. Talk your crap. Drew McIntyre wins the match. Goldberg needs to slide out, and you
take your ass whipping like a man and get to the back, bro.
Get to the back. I don't need you to. But the only time potentially you do that is if there's going to be a little bit of a chance of a swerve, and you beat his ass and you continue the feud. But otherwise, roll your ass out of the ring. I don't need to see the combatants hug and show each other respect. It's pre-scripted. We know they're going to go back and have beers, and they're going to laugh and cash the checks and listen to Vince McMahon complain. I don't need to see them doing that because it looked weak. It made Goldberg look stupid. It really did. It made him look old. It just let Drew McIntyre shine, and you don't diminish Goldberg. He did the job, no problem, but don't do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't like that that way of. It's almost like they're trying to pass the torch, but it's so forced. Like Drew McIntyre is the guy. He's been the guy. Just let him be the guy. You don't need to have Goldberg of anybody. Goldberg. You don't need Goldberg coming out to put him over. You just don't need it. Sasha Banks ends up forcing Carmella to tap out to retain the Women's SmackDown Championship. I thought this was a really good match. I think Carmella still comes out looking strong. Sasha Banks obviously should have been the champion, and she shouldn't have dropped it to Carmella. I think this was a match that really worked out well for everybody. Now, something we just touched on a little bit ago, the Women's Royal Rumble. At the end of this match, I thought this was a really good match. We got the future of the women's division as Bianca Belair entered at number 3, and she outlasted everybody else, including my new girlfriend, Rhea Ripley, to earn her chance to headline WrestleMania. At the very, very end of it all, Bianca Belair, Rhea Ripley were the final 2 combatants standing in the ring. They both threw out Charlotte Flair. The way I look at this is very symbiotic. All right, you're throwing out the old in Charlotte Flair. You even said in the group message, you were like, Charlotte's going to end up winning this. Watch. She didn't. The one that we picked, we both picked Bianca Belair. And if it came down to Bianca Belair and Rhea Ripley, I wouldn't have been upset either way, even if it meant I lost our predictions. Okay, didn't matter to me. The future won this match, and they won it doing it the right way. They threw out the old in Charlotte Flair, and the doors are wide open for somebody like Rhea Ripley, who's fantastic, and Bianca Belair, who is probably one of the most athletic women in WWE. I think the Women's Royal Rumble is, out of all the matches on this card, is the one that got it absolutely spot on, 100% correct.
But they didn't execute it properly because Rhea Ripley really won the match. When you slow-mo it, Bianca Belair's 2 feet hit the ground. And unfortunately, it's a botch, and that's why you don't have 2 women dangle their feet, because in this day and age, everybody's going to screen grab everything. Everybody's got DVR. Even the network has the ability to go back and look. And technically, it was a botch. B-O-T-C-H. Bad on you, Bianca. You can't do that. But absolutely, great match. It was fun. The returns were great. The ones that people were like, oh, really cool about, bro, I never heard of Jillian Harper. What did she do? Was she an announcer? Was she a wrestler? She came out and was like, oh, it's Jillian Harper. She was backstage. I'm like, who the hell is Jillian Harper? I popped for Tori Wilson. Whenever she comes back, she looks like they need to keep her as a valet. I mean, my God, Kevin Owens with Tori Wilson, Roman Reigns with Tori Wilson. Anybody? AJ Styles with Tori Wilson? Dude, does not anybody just go, Vince, I'm kind of feeling like my character's taking a little bit of a step back. I need like a valet, kind of like Tori Wilson. We need to travel together, kind of like build this connection. I want to travel with her. Then you can do like yoga with her and gain all the benefits. I mean,
did you remember back in the day when Goldust would come out with Marlena? Marlena was like smoking hot.
Yeah,
like,
Tori needs to be part of the company.
It was great. Like she really served a great purpose besides looking awesome.
Yeah,
you could do the same thing here with Tori Wilson if you want, and she can wrestle.
Yeah, it was good, man. It was all good in regards to the Women's Royal Rumble, except for the ending.
Yep. So this is the way we predicted this match had to play out, and I think WWE did a good job with it. Kevin Owens looked really, really good, but obviously he wasn't enough to outlast the Tribal Chief as Roman Reigns retains his Universal Championship. I think they got that right. Neither one of us really expected Kevin Owens to come away as the winner of this. But we needed Kevin Owens to come out looking like he deserved to be in the ring with Roman Reigns. And I think in the end, that's kind of what we got. Do you agree?
Yes, but we got another BOTCH because there was a bit there where Roman Reigns gets handcuffed to the bottom and they start counting. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And the best part is Paul Heyman's fiddling, goes to the top, goes to his arm, goes to the top, tries to put the key in. And it's like 6, 7, 8, and they stop the count. Then it could be potentially, for those that were conspiracy theorists, they started counting, and they kept going. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and it got all the way up to 33. So that was a botch. Technically speaking, Kevin Owens held Roman Reigns down for 10 seconds, but obviously they need to realize that you don't need a handcuff with a real key. You just, you've seen handcuffs before. You can have it where it just pops right off.
Bro,
you
my sex handcuffs have like a safety lock on them, so if I lock her up, she can just like manipulate her thumb and get it off. So
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. I was like, just boop. He just does it, and then it was funny. Everyone online laughed, but Roman Reigns looked legit. Kevin Owens with the spot of the night, dude. Jumping off the crane was legit. It was awesome. It was a beautiful high spot.
And then to close the show, you already know the winner, Edge. He goes the distance. He becomes the third man to ever enter as number one and outlast the entire field to earn a spot to challenge whomever. They've already teased NXT. They're gonna tease SmackDown on tonight. They've already teased Monday Night Raw with Drew McIntyre. He gets to challenge whomever he wants at WrestleMania, which is going to lead us to a bit of a discussion when we start talking about Monday Night Raw. I just want to kind of get your gauge as to what you thought about this match overall.
I liked the Rumble. Obviously, the Rumble has highlighted new stars for the men in quite a bit of the last few. And I kind of was kicking myself because I've watched NXT and we've talked about it, but it was the night for me of Damian Priest. I said,
you look really good.
I said, I've watched Damian Priest. He does not have this presence that he has now in this Royal Rumble, which is weird too because Keith Lee had the same thing. Maybe it's the Rumble, maybe it's the view with the person and the way that they're used in the ring in the Rumble, but Damian Priest looked like a star. He looked like somebody that belonged, somebody that right away could be in the IC mix, right away could have the Universal Championship, could have the U.S. title. He could get into the main event. He could be a mid-card, but beautiful use of Damian Priest. And I just felt like I hope that now he doesn't get the Keith Lee treatment and have a wasted run here on the main roster. But it was a beautiful call-up. I thought it was his night. Edge going all the way was cool. I liked AJ Styles. I liked the big guy kind of getting involved there. Christian returning was cool when I got to go back to the replay. I was a little disappointed in the fact that it wasn't Daniel Bryan. I know I would have lost had that happened, but no real big surprises in regards to, Carlito, it was cool, I guess, but it was one of those where you didn't have the moment for me where you're like, oh, holy shit. I would have did it where you get a new debut. Somebody else that it was from another company. Go find someone from ROH that you want to give them some money and have a one-off or something to have a little bit of excitement to counteract what you're seeing from your competition. But pretty straightforward, straight-laced. It's the year of Edge. Do I like that? Me personally, no. I would have just said, hey, have Damian Priest win it. Have somebody new, fresh. Morrison, somebody else, The Miz, somebody new. But to have Edge, I get it. They want to maximize his run, get him into the main event, get people to pay attention. For me, overall, the men's Royal Rumble was a B-, and it took an A card and brought it down to a B+. It was a B+ Royal Rumble. It was worth it, but it put me to sleep. I went out.
Yeah, well, I totally understand. There was no big salient moment where you're like, oh my God, that's the spot. Like if you remember last year's Royal Rumble, you had Keith Lee in there, and he ended up standing toe-to-toe with Brock Lesnar. And that was a moment that we remember and we talk about, right? And then you had Drew McIntyre throwing Brock Lesnar over the ropes. There were different points and different moments in last year's Royal Rumble, whereas this year you really didn't get that. All of a sudden, Randy Orton pops from out of nowhere, hits an RKO. Edge somehow survives it and staves it off to get the win. I know you didn't like Randy Orton just coming out of nowhere to hit the RKO. I thought it was kind of silly too. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly, and it was pointless to do it that way. You could have even had a couple more moves done in between there, but whatever. That's what they've done. Edge is the guy.
Yep. So because of all of this, we each got Bianca Belair, so we each get the bonus point for getting the correct person in the Women's Royal Rumble. We both missed on the Men's Royal Rumble, and we should have knew it was going to be Edge. We kind of talked about it last week when we were going over our predictions. We each get a half a point because we really didn't deviate too much from each other. We got a lot of our predictions right last week, so we're each sitting at 1.5 as we're tied.
We got a tie, baby.
Let's jump into what happened on Monday Night Raw. Are we going to get Randy Orton and Edge again? Do they pick up where they left off a year ago? Like, is this what we're going to do? I'm hoping that's not what we're going to do. I love the storyline that Randy Orton has going on right now with The Fiend and with Alexa Bliss. I don't necessarily need Randy Orton taking on Edge again. Like, where do you see Edge going? Does he challenge Drew McIntyre? Does it make more sense for him to challenge Roman Reigns? Because I could make the argument when we get to SmackDown. I think I will make that argument that Edge Roman Reigns probably makes more sense. I don't see him doing anything in NXT, but I just don't know. I just don't know where we go with Edge's character, as well as them trying to. It almost feels like they're trying to take this square storyline and jamming it into this round hole. Like, make it fit. It's going to work. We're WWE. Everything works. No, it doesn't. I don't think this works right now.
Exactly. I don't need to keep seeing Edge and Randy Orton. Play it out. It's been played out. I know that they want to do this long-term storytelling. I want to see Edge, and I think you will agree. I want to see him take his talents over to SmackDown and challenge Roman Reigns. That's the biggest fight. That's the money draw. That's the money fight. It's not Drew McIntyre Edge. Drew McIntyre could potentially put somebody younger over, or could potentially have a big match with somebody else that you got to figure out. Edge's got to do it on SmackDown.
I think I agree with you. When we get to SmackDown, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, Bad Bunny was in the ring, and I think Damian Priest got a little bit of a rub off of Bad Bunny, and Bad Bunny had a nice little spot at the Royal Rumble, but it seems as though WWE wants to see him in the ring, and they want him at WrestleMania. Do you want to see Bad Bunny in the ring, and do you want to see him at WrestleMania? Because I don't think I do.
I didn't even know what Bad Bunny was. I mean, my nephew was like, I think it was something that was derived from kids, like a YouTube star. I don't know what that was. He literally almost fell off the top rope. I mean, that's how bad. He got no air. He literally kind of just plopped down in the Royal Rumble. Now, the musical performance that he had was pretty sweet. I loved it. But that's all I needed to see. I didn't need to see him climb the rope and jump off because he almost killed himself. So, no, I don't need to see Bad Bunny, man. It's whatever. I guess he's dissing The Miz and Morrison. Whatever. It didn't add nothing for me. I don't know who it is. I'll look into it more. But this is like, what, an influencer that got his rub, another dude that gets to jump off the rope. Hey, if you're going to do it, at least go sideways and make yourself look cool. He looked like he just tried to fall and like, please God, catch me.
Yeah, it was. I don't need to see this man doing anything. I just don't need it. I don't think any of us need it. So hopefully he does not show up at WrestleMania, but I have a feeling he will. Let's transition over to NXT. And I think the one thing I took out of NXT this week is Karrion Kross has been repositioned back at the top and is again a primetime player. This is a guy who just came back from injury. We were wondering when he was going to get reinserted at the very tippy top of the card. And I think this week cemented him in his place. Now, I loved the moment where he came out. Actually, you had Scarlett come out first, and she watched the whole Santos Escobar match. But you had Karrion Kross come down, and I love Santos Escobar's reaction. Like, Santos Escobar he's going to be massive if he ever moves up to either Raw or SmackDown. He is a star waiting. All right. But Karrion Kross comes down and he just stares at him. And I love Escobar's reaction as Karrion Kross demolishes everybody in his crew to then climb in the ring. The one thing I did not like was the way Santos Escobar ended up rolling out of the ring. He almost looked like he was a scared child at that point. But I do like how he stood up to Karrion Kross initially. Just didn't like how he ended up rolling out. But Karrion Kross coming in, basically telling him that, hey, that belt is mine. I thought this was one of the bigger moments of this week's NXT. It gives you a little bit of direction of where Karrion Kross is going. He's going to challenge for the Cruiserweight Classic Championship, which I think is okay. There's a lot going on with Finn Balor, with Pete Dunne, whether or not Edge is going to get in that mix. There's a whole lot going on. So why not get a championship belt on this guy? Let somebody else take this Cruiserweight Championship for a while and let him do a couple different things with this belt, because I think it could really help accentuate this belt. Did you like this part of the show? Did you not? Because there's some more with Karrion Kross that I want to get to later that took place very, very shortly after all of this.
Yeah, I was very much impressed, and I liked seeing Edge on NXT. It kind of gave that air of, oh, what's going to happen? So very well done. NXT doesn't ever really veer from what is really acceptable and what people like. I think they do a good job of pushing stars, creating new ones, and right away, thank gosh, Karrion Kross is somebody that, his injury did not derail him, because once he's back, oh my gosh, he should be the focal point. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then we talked about Edge showing up on NXT, and Karrion Kross and Edge had a nice little run-in with each other. I thought it was fantastic. Again, There were two different big-time segments with Karrion Kross, and this is why I say that he's been repositioned at the very, very top of the roster in NXT, because challenges Escobar for his belt, and then later on in the evening, him and Edge have this nice little run-in outside, and basically Kross warns him like, hey, don't get involved in any of that because they're just holding my belt for me, so I'm coming for all of them. And Edge was like, you know what? That might just motivate me to take that. I really liked the back and forth that they had. Again, I think it sets up Karrion Kross really, really well going forward. You can either have him challenging Santos Escobar for his strap, or you can have him getting mixed up with Finn Balor and Pete Dunne and Edge and whomever else is holding the NXT championship. But I think coming out of NXT, Karrion Kross is back where he belongs at the very, very top. Now, SmackDown. We both agree. Edge should go to SmackDown. That's where I think he's going to be tonight. I think he's going to challenge Roman Reigns. I think this puts WWE in such a prime spot, right? We talked a lot about this the last couple weeks. There's really nobody there who challenges Roman Reigns that makes you think that they're even believable to be in the ring with him right now. They've done such a good job building Roman Reigns up, and he's done such a fantastic job of getting this new edition of himself over that it's really, really hard to put anybody else in the ring with him without him completely overshadowing them. I think Edge is a guy that can go in the ring. He's done it before. He's been there. He has that whole nostalgic feel, but he's a guy who can still wrestle at a high level. And I think Edge can go into the ring and not get overshadowed by Roman Reigns. And I think that's why he has to challenge Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. And I'm assuming you agree with me 100%.
1,000%. I think that's the money fight. That's I think what everybody probably is going to need to see. is night 1, Sasha Banks, Bianca, main event. Night 2, because it's a 2-night event, again, to punish us. Sunday, main event, end the show with Edge and Roman Reigns in a slobber knocker.
And then why don't you give us your take and your recap on what took place on Impact? By the way, I might have an inside track to a guy who just recently showed up on Impact and had his debut match. We might be able to get him on the podcast. I'm not sure. I'll see what I can do. I've got to go through some back channels to maybe make this happen.
Yeah, do it.
But if you watched Impact, there was a new star that showed up, and we might. I got to do some back channeling to try to get to him. Might be able to get him on for an interview. We'll see what we can do.
Okay, on the road to their championship encounter at No Surrender, which is going to take place on February 13th, Rich Swann and Tommy Dreamer partnered in the main event to battle Moose and Chris Bay. Now, that was worth it to watch. Now, for me, I was really excited about Impact and the manner in which they put together shows, but unfortunately for me, this show sucked. It was average at best. I mean, you had Tasha Steelz taking on Havoc. The match was average. I didn't like it. The first hour was pure average wrestling and nothing that was really, really awe-inspiring or anything that I really gravitated toward. You had Madman Fulton taking on Josh Alexander, which was fine. You had Alexander getting over, but nothing special there. The Eddie Edwards and Brian Myers feud kind of, moved forward, moved along. But, it was just like the first hour where you're just like, what's going on here? Why is this going on? And you had Larry D taking on Crazy Steve. And it was okay. Larry D went over, but, I'm down with the resurgence of Triple XL. But, I just was like, okay, what's going on here? Because it was really one of those shows where you kind of were like, okay, you got to build to a pay-per-view. When are you going to get to something good? Jordan Gray's taking on Susan. Okay, not much there. And then you got to the main event, TJP obviously with taking on Raju, which is fine, but I don't really care about the cruiserweights all that much. Match wasn't all that special. So the main event was good. Rich Swann, Tommy Dreamer, Moose, Chris Bay, those are the legit guys. So I don't know if this was a transitional show or what the reason was, but Moose and Bay went over. And, for me, it was the worst show, C-. And I was just like, okay, I think this is one of those ones where it just doesn't maybe because it's partly due to the Royal Rumble hangover watching Raw, but really, you could have missed it. Just watch that final match. You'll get what you need from Impact this week.
And I think AEW was kind of similar. I think AEW had a couple really prime spots, and we're going to talk about one of them. But overall, with AEW, I felt like this was just kind of a transitional show. And this was their bash at the beach. And to me, it almost felt forced, right? It like a lot of the matches were like, oh, hey, we've got this television-like pay-per-view, so we have to throw some really quality guys in a match and make some things happen. So let's have a battle royal, and let's have these three guys challenge these three guys, and let's do this and let's do that. And it just all kind of felt like it was just kind of put together and crammed without it almost happening organic. I think when we talk about wrestling and the things that we really, really like, it's when the storylines almost feel organic, when there's some type of a friction, and from that friction, we end up getting a fight, and we get the build to the fight, and the build to the fight feels like, yeah, these guys really hate each other, and they just want to get a piece of each other. And I think that's what we love. What we got on Wednesday night from AEW felt more structured, more forced, more creatively driven, and didn't, to me at least, it didn't feel very organic, didn't feel very natural, and it just kind of felt like a forced show. Am I out of line?
No, absolutely. There were a couple big moments which we're going to talk about, but I think you and I were on the same boat that the Kip Sabian's wedding was the most funny angle that they put out there, and it was good. It was pure entertainment, but absolutely, you were spot on in your reaction. But bottom line, I think it was kind of maybe done in a way to kind of build to the crescendo, which was the main event and what we got there. It was one of those kind of things where it's like, okay, let's build up, boom, a great scenario. I mean, whenever you got a chance to have Sting, and with that situation, it's still a decent show. We'll probably rate a B- in my opinion. That's how I grade it.
Yeah, I thought they could have did some things better, and I did think the Kip Sabian wedding, I thought that was fantastic. James Mitchell made a couple of mistakes in his delivery, which I thought was funny. I thought Rusev repeatedly, not once, not twice, but repeatedly taking shots at WWE for their wedding bits was fantastic. I thought it was really, really good.
Absolutely.
It was funny to me. You had to be a smart wrestling fan to kind of pick those things up, or at least a fan of WWE over the years to really pick it up. But like you said, it was really like a C plus B minus show all the way through until the very, very end, where we have a 6-man tag match where you've got Pac, you've got Rey Fenix, you got Jon Moxley taking on Kenny Omega and the Good Brothers. In the very, very end, Jon Moxley is beating the crap out of Kenny Omega when who shows up? New Japan's own Kenta. And now Kenta is, if you don't know the backstory, Kenta is the man who is challenging Jon Moxley for his NJPW American or U.S. Championship title. I'm sorry, and Kenta is they have this feud that is starting, that is being built between New Japan and obviously now AEW. We now have that tie-in. AEW and New Japan have been talking for quite some time now about exchanging talent and using each other. And the pandemic has really kind of slowed things down. And I think the pandemic is going to have a little bit of say on what happens, because in China, they don't mess around. Like if you travel, when you come back home, you've got to sit off to the side for 14 days and test, and you have to test negative for everything. So Kenta's going to be here for a little bit because you can't go back to New Japan for a little bit. So Kenta is going to be working in AEW. A few weeks ago, a couple days ago, Kenta had a post on Twitter. He was like, "How far is it from Orlando to Jacksonville?" Like just in plain sight, just like basically calling his shot. Nobody picked up on it. Nobody knew what the hell was happening. It was a great surprise. Kenta ends up showing up, takes out Jon Moxley. Next week on AEW, we've got Kenta taking on Jon Moxley. It's going to be fantastic. We've got what we've always wanted. We've got our New Japan tie-in, and it's going to be all for the IWGP U.S. Championship at some point. It's great, man. I was pumped. I was excited.
Yes.
Me and you were texting each other. We were both excited.
Good mark out moment because, yes, now all the dream matches are possible. You could have Bullet Club versus Bullet Club. You could have a lot of different tie-ins. You could have super matches that we've seen in Japan now take place. You could have so many dream matches. Tony Khan is a legit boss. This is what, I guess now that if you're a Lions fan, this is what collaboration in the wrestling world looks like. Hey, you got a company? Let's work together. Let's highlight you. You highlight me. We share the money. All is good. And you can have dream matches across the board. And you don't have to have this boundary of, well, I'm AEW, so I'm not going to work with nobody. This is amazing. But, again, in anything, you got to also work through, yes, this was the former Hideo Itami from WWE, so that's a good tie-in. But, unfortunately, they should have probably known, the producers, that if he's going to try to do the go to sleep, there highlights the size difference. He looked like a scrawny little punk lifting up Jon Moxley. That should not have been the move. He puts him up on his shoulder, then he botches the go to sleep move. You can't do that. It should have been all ground and pound. You tackle him, you kick him, you do moves where Moxley stays his ass on the ground. You needed to have Kenta look stronger. When he picked him up, you could see noticeably the size difference where Kenta looked like a cruiserweight. You needed to highlight it better to make him look like more of a monster. So you do kicks, you have potentially Kenny Omega hold him up, and you do a super kick, you do moves, swift moves, sweeps, Moxley trying to get up, boom, another kick down to the ground. That's how you would have done it differently. A botched go to sleep was the wrong way in terms of the wrestling to introduce Kenta, and he better step it up because the presentation was great. Purple hair. Everyone was like, oh, the shirt was perfect. Everything was perfect, but the wrestling. And that's on the producers. They got to get that right.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're going to talk about this match in particular, the 6-way tag, when we get to news and notes here in a few moments. But you're right. Kenta there's a dramatic size difference between him and Jon Moxley. The thing is, I think the thing to take out of what took place is if you are a wrestling fan and you are a fan of New Japan, you finally get your New Japan stars back here wrestling in the U.S. And New Japan for a while has wanted to set up some type of a tie because their partnership with ROH dissolved pretty quickly as soon as the Bucks and everybody jumped ship and started AEW. And then they were trying to work out a partnership with AEW, but New Japan didn't take AEW seriously. Since then, New Japan has had some restructuring in their front office, and now they're able to get this deal done. And I think if you are a wrestling fan, you get some of the best wrestling taking place in one of I'll just go ahead and say it. You get some of the best wrestling that you will see worldwide from New Japan taking place in the best wrestling federation that we have in the States. AEW puts on I think a hands down a 10 times better show than anything you'll get from WWE, even on their bad shows. So I think this is fantastic. I think if you're a wrestling fan, you should be excited by what you got on Wednesday night.
Tony Khan, legit boss. All right, cuz, hit me with this week's professional wrestling news and notes. What made your list?
A ton to get to this week. A ton. On Tuesday night, it was announced Lars Sullivan had been released from WWE. Not too much of a surprise there. Turns out he was released sometime in January, though. That was a little bit of a surprise, but it was made public this week. Sullivan said he had been battling crippling anxiety. That was an issue that he was working through earlier. He informed WWE that he was done with wrestling. He had in the days since where he was struggling to eat. He was having trouble sleeping. He wasn't able to really even get the energy to show up for the shows. So Lars Sullivan, done with wrestling, done with WWE. Now, somebody who's not done with WWE, my boy John Cena, he confirmed with Jimmy Fallon that he'll be back in a WWE ring as soon as possible. Currently, he's filming The Peacemaker, and it's basically he's taking his time with that. And a lot of it has to do with COVID. A lot of it has to do with international restrictions. So he can't bounce back and forth between filming the movie and then doing WWE. So he has to choose one, and right now the movie is going on with the production. So once that's done, he will be back in a WWE ring very, very soon. Speaking of more part-timers, you brought up Christian. I brought up Christian. We talked a lot about Christian in this podcast, probably the most we've talked about Christian since, all 168 prior episodes. Christian is talking about a return and wanting at least one more match. Christian said, I didn't know what to expect. You know, it's funny. Everybody has a plan until you get hit. And that's exactly what happened to me. I got hit once and I was like, okay, it's on. This is what I was born to do. So I feel like it was home. So expect more from Christian coming in the next couple weeks, months, maybe even a year. Jey Uso was advertised to be in the Men's Royal Rumble on Sunday, but he didn't end up entering the match. As of Sunday, he was not medically cleared to wrestle, and he's currently dealing with an injury that is unknown. We'll see what happens tonight on SmackDown. We'll see if he's part of anything that happens in ring or if he's just kind of part of the storyline. Wrestling Inc. is reporting that the contract of SmackDown star and multi-time tag team champion Cesaro is set to expire after WrestleMania 37 this coming April. If you remember a little while back, Chris Jericho teased wanting Cesaro in AEW and felt that he'd be a monster draw and champion in AEW. It'll be interesting to see if Cesaro takes that WWE money to stay away from AEW, or if he goes on to have a much more fulfilling character in AEW. We'll see what happens there. An AEW Dynamite match has been described as the most edited in AEW history due to inappropriate behavior from Impact Tag Champions Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson. Now, this is the main event we were just talking about a few moments ago, where Kenta came out and devastated Jon Moxley. I'm using devastated loosely here. But according to Dave Meltzer on Wrestling Observer Radio, the match had to be edited to make it fit for TV after the former WWE stars pretended to jack off in the ring. That was the most edited match in AEW history. Not because they botched moves, but because Gallows and Anderson kept doing jack-off-like stuff and pot stuff. They had to edit all these references off of TV. The Young Bucks even joked that they would have to edit the hell out of that match. And then 46-year-old Rey Mysterio confirms to Sports Illustrated, Justin Barrasso, that he signed a new contract with WWE. He went on to say, we never made the signing of my new deal public, but there is definitely going to be more time to see Rey Mysterio in WWE. I'm going to keep wrestling at least until Father Time catches up and says it's time to go. And one more little addition for you. If you have a Roku, If you have a Roku and you have access to the Roku channel, we talked a lot about New Japan in this show. New Japan has struck a deal with Roku where they will be putting unreleased episodes that haven't aired outside of Japan on the Roku channel. So very similar to their Access TV distribution deal, except now it's going to be on the Roku channel. Again, expanding that footprint in the U.S. because they want to be here in the U.S. So if you have a Roku or if you have access to the Roku channel, you will now get the New Japan matches probably a week, maybe 2 weeks later than what they're taking place in Japan, but they've not made their way outside of Japan unless you find some way to stream them illegally. And that's going to do it for this week's wrestling news and notes.
Lots to get to, man. That was good. Good stuff. Make sure to follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Make sure to follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, all you got to do is hit 3 words, Detroit Sports Podcast. And once you hit that subscribe button, our daily content finds you, where we cover Michigan sports, all things Detroit sports, professional wrestling, gambling. Adam does 2 other great podcasts, does the Practice Squad, and hopefully returning soon, the Rewind, where we get a chance to see a little bit of recapping things that have already happened in the world of Detroit sports. He started with the Lions. Maybe they can branch off into the Wings and telling great stories and recapping things that have already happened. Make sure that if you like what you're listening to, just tell 1 or 2 other people, hey, turn on Detroit Sports Podcast. Or if you're out there in the internet land and somebody's like, hey, what's your favorite podcast? Make sure tag at Detroit Podcast. Let people know, because once people latch on, they put the earbuds in and they listen to us, they stay afloat, they stay with us, they stay subscribed, and the numbers have been consistent. We've not had drop off in 7 years, and I love when you guys message us and say, hey, thank you. You help us keep me afloat of what's going on in wrestling or in the world of Detroit sports. I'm in Georgia, and I get to turn it on. So thank you guys so much for shouting us out, making us part of the Detroit sports scene, and now a growing part of the wrestling scene. So we've tackled Detroit sports. Maybe now we got to turn our attention. Maybe we'll get a big guest in the world of wrestling. Maybe we'll become the tag team podcast champions of the world, and we'll just create our own title and just make it and just put DSP in the middle and just flaunt it. And we could be our own champions. We can be the podcast tag team champions, the podcast duo that will ruin the world. Don't put thoughts in my head. Let's see what happens with that thought. Thanks, guys. Let's talk soon on the next edition of the Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast. Woo!